to the first ever Got2b and Ditch the Label Self-Expression Summit hosted by color and styling brand Got2b in partnership with the global youth charity Ditch the Label. I'm Avani Gregg and I'm honored to be here as your keynote speaker. I'm honored that Got2b thought of me to be their keynote speaker. I appreciate what they stand for as a brand, which is to encourage and inspire people to be whoever they want. Society can sometimes make people feel like they need to stay in a certain box, fit a certain role, and stick to one specific style. But Got2b encourages you to break that mold. Many of you know me as a beauty guru and a digital creator. I rose to Insta fame when I posted a video of a makeup trend that went viral on TikTok. Since then, I've gained 41 million followers on TikTok and 20 million followers on Instagram. I've worked with major retail and beauty brands and have famous friends, and I'm only 19 years old. My life sounds pretty perfect, right? But let's back up and I'll tell you a bit about my story. I grew up in Indiana and was raised by mixed-race parents. My father is African American and Mongolian, and my mother is Indian. I had big dreams of becoming an Olympic gymnast. I was level 9 for 10 years before I eventually had to retire due to a back injury. After that, I struggled to find my purpose and make sense of my new life. What did my future look like now? And am I good at anything else? Is it even worth to try? I couldn't help but let the self-doubt creep in. It was overwhelming. I found social media and it turned out to be a source of self-expression for me. I could still share some gymnastics tricks and post silly videos with my friends, but I also found a passion for beauty and makeup, and I love it. It made me feel so good and confident to create a makeup look I was proud of and share it with others, even if only one other person saw it. It was my personal way of expressing my personality and my individuality. But people can be critical, and high schoolers were among the most cruel. Once my videos became more popular, word spread to my classmates who didn't hesitate to tell me what they thought of them and of me. The bullying started with snide passing remarks in the hallway, then spread like wildfire throughout my community, and was joined by an endless stream of comments from strangers on the internet. And it wasn't just a critique of my gymnastics form or how I did my wing eyeliner. People were coming after me personally for my looks, my race, and the way I spoke. I've made no secret about my experiences with bullying. I've even written it down on paper in my first memoir called Black Story, My Life So Far. In the book, I write about not only my rise to fame, but about my mental health struggles, my history with being bullied, and finally getting to a place where I'm able to express myself without caring what other people think. Today is June 17th, which is Stop Cyberbullying Day. All of us have experienced and overcome struggles in our lives, be it mental health, bullying, identity, family relationships, the list goes on. But you're not alone. I'm here and I'm joined by an incredible group of panelists brought together, handpicked by Got2b because they are everyday heroes who stand for something, and they want to stand for you. Got2b's brand purpose is to encourage self-expression and celebrate who you are and who you want to be. That is why they have a broad range of color and styling products that help you express yourself no matter what it is. But they needed help to spread this message, so they teamed up with the Ditch the Label, a global and digital first youth charity that helps people navigate the issues that affect them the most. Founded by CEO Liam Hackett, who you will be hearing from shortly, Ditch the Label's mission is to positively influence how society thinks and behaves, reducing the rates of issues such as stigma, prejudice, abuse, and hate speech. For the next hour, we welcome you all into our safe place, our own metaverse, where we can be free to express ourselves without judgment. Liam will be joining us in just a few moments and introducing everyone to our panelists who are here to share their incredible stories and journeys to feeling free to be whoever they want to be. Together, we hope to spread kindness and the importance of accepting others, as well as empowering those who may be struggling. Research says spreading kindness not only helps others feel better about themselves, but it can also boost the giver's health and happiness. We know we can't change the world overnight, but we can use our voice and platform to promote being kind to one another. Now, to give you a preview of what's to come for the next hour, we invite you to watch this short video introducing the Got2b and Ditch the Label partnership and purpose of the Self-Expression Summit.
You are not alone. More than half of people under 25 have experienced bullying at some point, and research has shown that 3 out of 5 people have experienced cyberbullying at some point. 2/3 of tween victims of cyberbullying said that it had a negative impact on how they felt about themselves. göt2b's brand purpose is to encourage self-expression and celebrate who you are and who you want to be. Now is the time for göt2b to take a stand, and together with Ditch the Label, we will be standing up for something. You. Ditch the Label is a global youth charity dedicated to providing equality and support to those negatively affected by bullying and prejudice. Together, Ditch the Label and göt2b are uniting to take an active stand against all forms of bullying and cyberbullying by bringing awareness and being a strong voice of advocacy. Follow along on Instagram at göt2busa to get on the self-expression journey with göt2b and be who you want to be at göt2b.com.
Thank you for listening and for joining. Now it's my honor to welcome CEO and founder of Ditch the Label, Liam Hackett.
Hello, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the göt2b and Ditch the Label panel discussion. Today, I am joined by the most incredible, most inspiring collection of panelists here to talk about everything from the internet, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to be talking about mental health and freedom of expression. And I think this may possibly be one of the first panel discussions in the metaverse. So we are quite literally making history together today. It's never been more important to have conversations like the conversations that we're having today. Unfortunately, we know that topics such as online abuse, poor mental health, and unhealthy body image are sadly on the rise. In fact, we found that over the past 2 years, online hate speech has exploded, with some forms of hate speech increasing by over 2,000%. We also know that there's a global epidemic of people struggling with mental well-being, and we know that body image is at an all-time low. In fact, the majority of young people tell us that social media negatively contributes towards the way they see themselves and their bodies. In fact, half of people who have experienced bullying say that it's because of attitudes towards how they look. We asked young people how they feel about themselves, and 19% said that they'd never feel good about themselves, with 24% telling us that they only feel good about themselves very rarely. And so conversations like the ones that we're having today have never been more important. My name is Liam Hackett, and I'm the founder and CEO of the global youth charity, Ditch the Label. And we are here to help you navigate the issues that matter the most. So whether you're struggling with online abuse, mental health, coming out, or body image, or relationships, Ditch the Label is here to support you through it. If you are impacted by any of the issues that we talk about in the panel today, or indeed at this summit, please head over to the Ditch the Label website, where you can get help and support from our community of trained mentors and other people who are going through the same thing. We are incredibly proud to be working with göt2b on this summit today, and together we are standing united to really champion self-expression. We believe collectively that it's important now more than ever to really be yourself and to live in a world where people feel free to be who they really are. Ditch the Label actually started when I was 15. I struggled with issues such as bullying and identity and mental health. And I started to talk about these experiences online. And I literally had hundreds of people message me overnight to share their experiences. And so I very quickly realized that the internet could be a really powerful tool to connect people together for advice and support. But that's enough about me and Ditch the Label. It's time to introduce our incredible collection of panelists. I'm going to start with the actor, philanthropist, and göt2b brand ambassador, Tati Gabrielle. We are also joined by educator, author, and creator of the Smarter in Seconds series, Blair Imani. We have public speaker and social media activist Matthew Joseph Diaz. We also are joined by actor, writer, and director Alexis G. Zal.
Hello.
And finally, we are joined by content creator and mental health advocate Stephen Sharp Jr. Welcome to our incredible panelists. I just want to start the conversation by asking each panelist individually, why is it important to be taking part in the göt2b Self-Expression Summit? And I think it makes most sense to start with you, Tati Gabrielle.
Well, I just think that self-expression is one of the most powerful gifts that we possess. It is, to me, the truest form of freedom. And it opens so many doors for us to be able to enjoy life to the fullest. And so I think it's a great paradox that something that should be so innate to us is so difficult to arrive at. And so I wanted to join this summit because I've always been fascinated by the idea that every person is so unique, that there's no two people that are exactly alike, and that I believe that there's a divine necessity for each of those, unique manifestations of life. And with that, like, I think that each has its own purpose, its own contribution to the world, and that can only be realized through self-expression. And so I want to be here so that I can empower people to be their absolute best selves, to be their beautiful, unique selves. And I think that the world will be a place when we, self-express, and it gives others a permission to do the same and take part in the joy of freedom.
You're so right. There's nothing more empowering than sharing our own stories and our own advice. Blair, how about you?
Well, I think that it's just so important to emphasize just what Tati said, that self-expression is so important, and there are so many concerted efforts dedicated to preventing us from learning about ourselves, from being ourselves, from expressing ourselves, and from showcasing that in all the many, multiplicitous ways that we can do that. Those are all things that I'm really dedicated to, and that's something that Ditch the Label and göt2b are doing so effortlessly. And so to be part of that is such a blessing and such an honor.
I think finding your voice is such a massive part of it, isn't it? And kind of when we talk about the internet, it's such a great way to discover who you are. Okay, over to you, Matthew.
Well, aside from the fact that this is all just a very cool thing to be a part of, I, as a member of several marginalized identities, from being a person of color to being a queer person to being a non-binary person, I feel as though people have a responsibility to be the truest and purest versions of themselves so that everyone else around them feels the freedom to do the same. I'm very clearly echoing what Tati and Blair have said thus far, but there is a true freedom that comes in self-expression where every moment with every piece of clothing or jewelry, every tattoo or piercing, or for me, just like the ability to grow my hair out helps me feel so much more like myself. And in a world that tries to hold you to cultural and societal constraints, doing that is one of the purest forms of rebellion that can be good for you and for every person around you.
That intersectionality is such an important conversation. Over to you, Alexis.
I think personally, and this sort of, echoes what you all spoke to. I think it's important to sort of self-express overall, because you never know when you will be the reason that somebody else comes to understand themselves. And it makes me think of sort of these other moments of like the Ring of Keys moment, or like there's this great Shel Silverstein poem called Masks, where basically when you are your truest self, you then are free to meet people who are like you. And I think learning to connect with that part of yourself makes it so much easier and more fulfilling to connect with other people and to have stronger relationships with those around you.
I mean, raise your hand if you've ever felt like you've had to try and conceal part of your identity. I mean, it's very, very claustrophobic, and the most empowering thing you can do is be yourself. Finally, over to Stephen.
Yeah, just kind of to everyone else, like it's an incredibly special thing to be able to find yourself, especially in this climate with everything that's going on in the world. Something that Tati said was, it's something that's so innate within us, and I believe it's one of life's greatest joys to, figure out like what you like and like where you want to go and explore different parts of yourself. And like everyone was saying, like it really does give permission to other people to also express themselves and to live their truest selves.
Absolutely. Some incredible answers. Before we get into the questions, I do need to note we have a lot to get through today, but if you, the audience at home, do have any questions for any of our panelists, do use the chat box and we will get through as many as we possibly can at the end. Right, let's begin. So let's start with you, Tati. My first question for you is, obviously göt2b is such an iconic brand, and you could probably argue as part of most of our lives growing up, and kind of our expression, the hair is a big deal. How did it feel when you were asked to become a brand ambassador?
It was very exciting, especially like knowing the message that göt2b was spreading of like, wanting everybody to be themselves, to be whoever they wanted to be. It's something that I preach on a daily basis, to friends, to strangers, to whoever I can. And I telling my favorite compliment to give is to people is that they're beautiful. Just to see a smile on someone's face. So I was so excited to join as a brand ambassador, and very much look forward to the work that I get to do with them.
And in the metaverse, it doesn't get any cooler than that, does it?
Right?
My next question. Obviously, you've been in the public eye for a long time, and that's just grown exponentially since series 3 of the Netflix hit series You, which I loved, by the way. What has that been like? Like, how have things changed for you since that series?
Um, I mean, it's changed a lot. Like, I mean, being in, the public eye so much, it's definitely, I feel like in a way made me both more self-conscious as well as a greater responsibility to be genuine and be my absolute self. Which I've kind of loved the dichotomy of that. Like, I've gone through quite a few like mental health issues throughout the course of my life, still to this day. And, I work with them. And so for my social anxiety and everything be, to have such attention all the time, it caused me to challenge myself in a really beautiful way. To be like, okay, be more yourself then. Because then, and the more that I sort of take away all of the fluff or all of the pressure that might be put on me, and just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna be. I find myself being freer and freer, and it just it brings me so much joy to know and to see the way that people receive that, and the messages that I get of empowerment, that I've empowered other people to go out and do this, or to wear their hair this way, or to just be themselves. It's just been very rewarding. Yeah.
It's great to see as well. I mean, I love the content that you're posting, and just being authentically yourself is just so incredibly important. My next question goes out to Matt. So, one issue that we find a lot at Digital Label is so many people struggle with body image, and we live in this world where there's almost this kind of concept of Instagram versus reality. And you are somebody who has been really open about your own journey with body image. Can you share a little bit about that, and kind of your advice as to how you've got to a position of self-acceptance and self-love?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot, especially because I had some recent anniversaries of like big viral moments in my social media activism sort of career that have really made me sort of reflect on what's happened in the last couple of years since I started doing this work back in like 2015. And I think the biggest thing that is most important for people to know, if I had to like dilute everything down to what I find the most important right now, is to make sure that you understand that you're never at a point where you're done with that journey. I am someone
Mm.
who I struggled so much with my weight my entire life. At my max, I was around 500 pounds. I lost around 300 of them. I gained a bunch of them back after I realized I was doing that weight loss in an unhealthy way. And even now, as like, I'm proudly one of the most confident people I know, and everyone in my life will tell you that for better or worse. But even I still have moments very frequently where I struggle with my own self-image. And the most important thing people can understand is that self-love is a practice and not a state of being. You have to act in self-love even when you aren't feeling it in the day. And sometimes that looks like doing something cozy and treating yourself. And sometimes that looks like getting up and taking a shower because it's way overdue and you've been depressed for several days. The biggest thing anyone can know is that they are never done with their journey, but they are deserving of care and love from themselves and from each other, like every step of the way.
I saw something interesting online the other day, and it really kind of got me thinking. And it was saying that, we're born with all the confidence in the world, and it's not necessarily about learning to be confident. It's actually trying to counteract our confidence being stripped away from us from all of these kind of life experiences. You are somebody that has very bravely and fiercely documented your own journey and put so much vulnerability out there. You coined the term mindful vulnerability. Can you explain what that means and how you encourage your audience to be mindfully vulnerable?
Yeah, so for context, this is something that I've been talking about in recent years, especially as I've become more active on social media, both in my personal and professional life. The idea of mindful vulnerability is basically being able to find your own personal boundaries to where your involvement with the internet and with parasocial relationships and with the public sort of cuts off for the sake of your own mental well-being. For me, I was very, very much in the public eye when I was in the biggest throes of my journey, both with my weight loss and with self-love. I had a video go viral in 2015 that was seen by tens of millions of people, and so I became very online very quickly. And in the year following that, I worked myself to death. I was being open in a way that didn't feel safe for me, but felt like a responsibility I had to all these people that were watching. And my emotional well-being, my mental well-being, my physical well-being all suffered because I was putting the needs of people that were watching me above myself. And a close friend once told me that self-care has to be the root of all advocacy, especially as people in marginalized groups. We are expected to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of bettering the world, and that can't be where sustainable activism comes from. And so that is the biggest thing I think that people can take from it, is just understanding that at the root, you need to be okay before you can help other people. The same way that you should put your own mask on an airplane that's going down before you help the kids out. You know what I mean?
It's great that more conversations are opening up around these boundaries, especially for
Truly.
content creators. That is a perfect segue onto my next question for Stephen. Obviously, you have your own podcast which discusses openly mental health, and we know that people typically struggle talking about these issues and generally keep their mental health private. What do you think the past few years has really taught us when it comes to talking about our mental health?
Honestly, Matthew said something that is very, very poignant, I think, about creating that boundary with our mental health and on a social media standpoint. But in the context of the podcast, and what I wanted to do is, create a safe space where people can just speak openly. And I think, just to echo what we've been saying, is being brave is giving permission for other people to be brave. And that's something that I wanted to do with the podcast, is literally just be able to speak openly about the things that may feel taboo, but realizing that if I don't say something about it, who else is going to do it? And I'm not going to just wait around for someone else to start the conversation. I just need to do it myself. But it's been such a rewarding experience to be able to create a space where people feel safe to talk about things that maybe might feel extremely heavy or uncomfortable or awkward to talk about, but are human experiences that many people share.
I think what's so great about podcasts like Sanctum Podcasts and people sharing their stories is it gives people articulation and the words that they can use to describe, whatever it is that they're going through. My next question to you is, what I love about you is you are so experimental with your own individual style. Can you talk to us a bit about that and how it has helped with your mental health and your self-expression?
Yeah, I think early on, kind of fashion was a way that it was an easy way that I could kind of segue into figuring out what I enjoyed and how I liked my body to look, or how I wanted to present myself to the world. And I think for a lot of people, that's why fashion is such a multi-billion-dollar industry around the world, is that it's the gateway to telling someone who you are, what you believe in, etc., without you even having to say a word. But for me, it really started off with that, and then finding my voice once I got comfortable and then being able to like break rules if I needed to. Yeah, it's been such a rewarding experience to be able to be have a platform where I can share my story and share the way that I feel comfortable in my body. And yeah, and it's led to all these great, incredible opportunities like being here.
In the metaverse.
In the
My next,
this is so
I just can't get over that we're in the metaverse. I mean, I still don't know what it is. But so my next question is to Blair. So obviously you're an author and you have your own series, Smarter in Seconds, which is incredible, by the way. Can you tell us a bit more about your work and why it's so important to you to package education in such an approachable format?
Oh, absolutely. I think I have to go back to my first time working in a museum. So I studied as a historian back in college and university, and I kind of got up in, my own butt in a way. I think a lot of us go to higher education and feel like we're smarter than everyone else, and kind of look down on people who haven't gone to university or people who don't know the things that we know. And we see this on the internet so often. I know that everybody does. Like, you post a caption and you'll get somebody in the comments going, well, actually, what about this? And it can be quite frustrating. But back when I was not my most humble self, to say the least, I was working with Miss Sadie Roberts Joseph. And there's this group of 8-year-olds that came to the museum to learn about Reconstruction, Black American history. And I looked at her and I said, Miss Sadie, these kids are not going to understand all this stuff. And she was like, well, if they don't understand, that's on your ability to teach, not on their ability to learn. So you better study it yourself so you can actually explain it to them. And I was like, drag me, like I felt very caught out and called out, and it was very necessary. And since that point, I've had a really, much healthy understanding of education. I've taken some, personal journey, some self-reflection. And I really think that there's so much that we see in the the gap between like academia and online conversations. Like even what Matthew was talking about, Audre Lorde really talked about a lot of these concepts. And Matthew is putting this into words that connect with so many people. So it's really about connection. It's not about these concepts being out of reach, but sometimes the language we use to discuss them being inaccessible. And so I try to package everything. I really made Smarter in Seconds for my mom because my mom's a busy woman. She's always working. She then volunteers, which has become another job. And she doesn't have time to learn about all these things that are really important to me in the ways we understand the world. So if I can turn a conversation about how gender is a construct into a 30 to 60-second video, that's much more accessible to her than me asking her to watch a TED Talk or, to take time out of her busy schedule in life to learn about other people's experiences. She has that desire, she just doesn't have the time. So I'm trying to bridge that gap. And it's not about, oh, I'm going to help you get smarter because you're not smart. It's that we all have a place to go, that we're never done learning. We always have more to do, more to see, and more to explore. And it's been a challenge, but it's been a lot of fun.
You've really nailed it with this series because we're also overwhelmed by all of this information and endless scrolling, and we're becoming so impatient and we just want everything now and we want it quick and we want to consume content quick. And, to package such big lessons into such an accessible format is genius. And, it's incredible what you've done. My next question is to Alexis. So obviously you have a strong background in social media, which is now spilling into traditional media. I'm interested how you integrate your passion for LGBTQ plus rights into your writing and directing work.
It's such an interesting question because I don't even necessarily think of it like that. But all of the stuff that I make, like, generally is very queer, but I'm not necessarily like, I want to make gay stuff. It's just like, I am a storyteller and am queer. And my entire sort of like lens through which I view the world is through that, because that's, my identity and that's who I am, and that affects my relationship with the world, and how I'm perceived and how I perceive things. And so just these stories that I end up telling are oftentimes centered on queerness, or having queerness sort of playing a pivotal and important role.
And this is why representation really matters, because it doesn't become tokenistic. It's just a natural part of the process, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I would super agree. Yeah, I really don't try and like force it. It just is, those are the stories that I want to tell because that's who I am.
Perfect. Back to Blur. So the topics that you're talking about, you know, I'm guessing the response isn't always positive. We know from our research that unfortunately the internet can be a really hateful place. So what, how do you prevent hateful comments from affecting the kind of impact of your education and the content that you're putting out there?
Well, let me just say I've come a really far way when it comes to that because previously I would get hate comments. I would almost do this kind of form of self harm where I would like look up comments to see the negative ones. I mean, I think that a lot of folks, especially once you get into the public eye, like you have that temptation to search yourself on Twitter. Don't do it. It's even if it's good, it's just this like this Pandora's box that doesn't need to be opened. And so it's taken me from, really getting hives and having such a visceral physical reaction to hyperventilating to really just being very chill about it today. And I mean, Monroe Bergdorf is really to thank for so much of that transformation. I saw her at the Teen Vogue Summit way back, I think it was 2018, and she just said, like, honey, you don't have to respond to those things. Just delete it. Don't pay it any mind. We were not meant to know what everyone thinks about us because we're not for everyone. That's the first thing. And I don't think it's about building a tougher skin or like, getting a thicker skin, as so many people say. It's about developing coping mechanisms to deal with these things. To know that when somebody comes at you and they're a complete stranger, they don't know who you are, they don't know your context, but they want to ruin your day, that's really about them and not about you. They don't know you. Like, if they're trying to say these things to you and hurt your feelings, that has to do more with them than it does with you. And so it's just holding on to that. That's something my mom taught me. And then on the other side of that, really remembering that what they say about you isn't who you really are, and holding on to that and remembering that they might try to characterize you in ways that just are not true. And so what I started doing is that when people send me a message and they hurt my feelings, sometimes if I have the time of day, I'll be like, did you intend to hurt my feelings? And I swear almost 10 times out of 10, so maybe 9.8 times out of 10, that person is like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was going to hurt your feelings. I didn't even think you were going to read that. I just had a bad day. And so it's sometimes remembering that you might be seeing the worst of somebody. You might be seeing them on their absolute worst day. And it can be really difficult to do, but it's so worth it because you get to show up better for yourself and for other people. And you just remember that to some people, you're just a notification. And sometimes they want to be mean to that notification, but they're not actually trying to attack you.
Would I be wrong to assume that everybody here has done this digital self-harm where you almost can't stop reading the negative things, and it takes a lot to really pull yourself out of that and a lot of neurology to kind of rewrite, because we are almost programmed to seek it out. And what you're saying about people who are abusive online is incredibly wise, and we've done a lot of research on it at Digital Label, and what we found is that people who troll, bully online or offline, there's always a root issue. Happy, confident people don't go out of their ways to try and drag other people down and make them feel bad. What we know is that quite often there could be trauma in their lives, there could be abuse, there could be stress, there could be a whole myriad of different issues that they're not dealing with in the right way because maybe they don't have the right tools to positively deal with it, or maybe they're not in the right environment. But I think just even knowing that is really empowering when you are being targeted online, because it removes the ownership from you and puts it onto them. It's not because of you, it's because whatever circumstance they find themselves in, they're not dealing with it in the right way. So I think what you're saying, the evidence backs up everything that you're saying, but it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I always try and remember that, like, I loved what Blair said about like you are not for everybody. And I always try and remember like the people who, viscerally hate me online, like if I knew them, I probably wouldn't like them either. Like I think we're just maybe not compatible people.
Well, one way that I try to look at it as well is like, I mean, just in life, like when I encounter someone who is rude to me or is snappy or whatever the case, that's usually my first thought is that, hurt people hurt people. And the idea of like killing someone with kindness is such a real thing of like, they're like going to the grocery store and like the clerk behind the counter is having a bad day and it's just so rude to you. And just the simple question of going like, hey, how was your day? How's your day going? you doing okay? Like, will change someone's whole demeanor just from that simple connection. And that's really what I feel like we're all after as human beings, is we want to connect, we want to feel loved. And so to return that hate with love, I feel like is always a winner.
And it's always a positive thing to not allow somebody else's behavior to affect your standard of behavior and how you treat them in return. So I love that. Tati, next question goes to you. So obviously göt2b, we're super excited to work with you as a new brand partner because you ooze self-confidence and style. What advice do you have for people who are watching today who are struggling to figure out who they are and maybe struggling to really embrace their own personal self-expression?
Well, know that it definitely, it's that's so funny to hear, because it's been a road for me to come to self-confidence, a long road, because like I said, I've, struggled with mental health, and I have, just struggled with my own self-image and feeling like I was special. And so within my fashion and in the things that I do, like, every day that I look in the mirror, every time that I put something on, I just go, how does this make me feel? How am I feeling today? What is the character that I want to go into the world in? And so the advice that I would have for people is to don't care. And I know that that's much easier said than done. But it's when you challenge yourself every day and every moment, when you hear that thought come into your head, that self-doubt, immediately say back to yourself, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Just catch the thought in the moment. And from doing that in just little moments, and those moments became more frequent and just became easier to catch those thoughts. So I always, say that, like, whenever we find a new trend, that new trend was set by somebody who literally decided to walk out the house and just own whatever it is that they have put together. That's all a trendsetter really is just you tried something. And so in the same way, just try, play. That is what life is for. Like, and that's one of the things that I love that Steven said, is that, like, it is one of the greatest joys in life to find yourself. It's what, we are given work and school and all of these things as distraction, but life is really about your journey and the, magic that you encounter on that journey. So I would just say to people, just try. It always starts with just one small moment. And the more you take those small moments, they'll turn into big moments and they'll keep going. Yeah.
I need that as an audio note. That was fantastic. Thank you. My next question is to Alexis. So you came out online. Can you tell us a bit about that experience and how what that really looked like for you, how you got to that space to come out so publicly?
Right. When I was a teenager, I made YouTube videos, and I loved it so much, and it was, both a passion and my job. And every year on my birthday, I would make like 15 tips for 15 years or 16 tips, whatever age I was. And a lot of the videos I did were, scripted and sort of more like comedically inclined, I suppose. And those videos were just they're really important to me, and an opportunity to just like really connect and be honest and just like share. And when I was turning 18, such a huge part of that year, the year I was 17, had been, very consumed by coming to terms with and realizing that I was gay. And I just knew that I couldn't make that video honestly and as authentically as I wanted to, without sharing that. But then, just at the time, I wasn't inclined to sort of make a whole like coming out video. So I just did it as like one of the moments in the video, and that was, I don't know, I was very proud of myself. It's the video, when I look back on like my YouTube career, it's the video I'm most proud of, like, far and away. And I just I'm so proud of that girl who did that. And I think I was just, very focused on like, well, I want to make this video and I want to be honest, so I have to do that. And I wasn't even sort of like like now I look at it and I'm like, wow, that was really brave. And I was young. And at the time, I just wasn't really thinking about it like that. I was just like, how do I, create honestly?
And that kind of content is so powerful. And, it's hard enough to come out to one person, never mind thousands. So, huge respect for what you did there. My next question is over to Matt. So outside of body image, what advice would you give to viewers today about embracing themselves and really kind of affirming that we are all truly good enough?
I think that there's two versions of this, where there's the version about how we embrace ourselves and the version of how we embrace each other. In response to like what Alexis and what Tati have said, I think that a piece of advice I can give that's not just parroting back their very, very good like advice and experiences is to allow yourself to make mistakes without letting that make you completely fall off of the journey that you're already on. I'm someone who, my style is very important to me. My hair is very important to me. And these all came after fumbling like a lot with what I was figuring out, because I didn't know what looked good on me or what I felt good in. And so I always say that, like, remember that 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still 1 step forward, and that is still meaningful. And when it comes to like being there for others, the biggest thing you can do is to show compassion and show that you are a safe place for these people to be themselves around. And I don't mean that with like a BLM tag in your Twitter bio or posting a black screen on Instagram when they're to show like that you're an ally. I'm talking about through your actions, through your self-expression, and through like the person that you are when no one else is looking at you. Body image for me was the small domino that led to me having the freedom to understand that I was a queer person, and to understand that I did not subscribe to the gender binary, and to really know myself. And that all happened because I gave myself the freedom to make mistakes and to be messy, and to like truly know that it wasn't a straight up like walk up a flight of stairs to get to the person that I really was.
It sounds like your journey with vulnerability has just been the most empowering thing, and kind of supported so many other people who have been going through similar things to you. And that is why the internet is such an incredible space. I know it gets a lot of flack and it's not all great, but there's also a lot of real positives. And a lot of the things that we're all talking about today is just an exact case study of how to do the internet well. My next question is to Stephen. It's very clear that self-care is so important, and we all owe it to ourselves to proactively look after our mental health. But we kind of almost live in this culture where we're kind of made to feel guilty for self-care. It's kind of quite often seen as a bad thing. What do you say about that? And what advice would you give to people who perhaps, kind of want to experiment with self-care, but have this element of guilt around it?
I would say for me, it started off with breaking this idea that self-care or caring for myself was selfish. And I think a lot of people get caught in this idea that, if I prioritize myself or put myself first, that I'm neglecting everything else, which is not entirely true. Like that's taking it to an extent that it doesn't need to go to. It truly can mean, it's something as simple as feeding yourself before you check your emails in the morning, and creating some sort of barrier between you and the responsibilities that you have. Someone said earlier, like, you kind of have to put your mask on first before you help anyone else. It's very much kind of that same concept, where you have to really take care of your body. And in my case, it was, feeding my body. I struggled with an eating disorder. It was like, and I had to get to a point where I was like, I need to eat, I need to take care of my body, I need to make sure I get rest and water and hydrate and all those things before I can even give anyone else my energy.
It's wild to think that our bodies are literally our homes for this life, and it's the greatest gift that we'll ever receive. And so, what you're saying about looking after it is just so incredibly important. My next question is to Blair. From your experience, what's your advice for people who are struggling on the pathway of self-acceptance against this barrage of oppressive systems in the world that we live in?
That's exactly right, Liam. Systems of oppression really is at the core of everything. What Stephen was talking about, feeling guilty because you're taking care of yourself and you're being offline and you're not working, that's because of things like capitalism and classism that define our worth based on how productive we are, how much we're producing. And as content creators and people on the internet, that can be the entire the entire gig. So it's really important to start to dismantle those internalized systems and remind yourself that who you are and the ways and reasons you feel guilty for the parts of you that don't fit into these systems, these pre-approved definitions of who you should be, that's not your fault. And so really recognizing that it's not your fault, you are who you are, and that the best loyalty you can show to yourself is to love yourself, because you come into this world with you and you leave this world with you. And it's important to be your number one cheerleader. You can be humble and confident at the same time. You can know that you're absolutely doing the best, or you're doing your best, or you're always trying to get better. And you can also be honest about the ways that you have to improve. But being your worst critic and, then simultaneously never listening to criticism, you want to find a happy medium somewhere in the middle where you're acknowledging the fact that you might feel like an imposter because you've been told your whole life that you shouldn't be in a certain position, that you feel like you shouldn't be, that you have to be productive. Well, that's because all of our society is built around that. So it's really taking the pressure off of it just being something you invented in your own mind. And of course, mental health does factor into this. But what it also is the fact that we are socialized to believe things about ourselves. And a lot of what adulthood is unlearning those things and getting back to an understanding of who you are.
So Tati, you have been a huge open supporter of positive mental health for Gen Zs, and you have spoken openly about your own journey with mental health. How has that shaped the advice and the content that you post surrounding mental well-being for young people?
Well, I have been in some very dark, difficult spaces in my life, and sometimes they still come about. And I know in those moments how alone I feel, and how just dark and small I feel, and how scary the sort of world feels. And so with that, I was like, once I realized, I was like, I can't be the only person, feeling this way. And why is there such a stigma on mental health? Why is there such a stigma on, or why are we made to feel ashamed of something that is also a part of ourselves? That I try to look at, my mental illnesses as superpowers sometimes. Like, I have ADHD, therefore I can take in, twice as much stimuli as the average person. Like, and so I wanted to be able to give people the same sort of comfort and break that stigma anywhere and as much as I can. And I think that the only way to do that is by talking about it more, is by being as honest as possible. And to dismantle like all across the world, there's so many cultures. I feel like I just sort of switched my tangent very quickly. Sorry, my brain does that at times. But there's so many cultures that even more than ours oppress, like, talking about one's emotions or saying or speaking up in any regard to vulnerability. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems with why there's so much chaos and disconnect in our world, is because we're not able to fundamentally understand one another from a spiritual or emotional level. And yeah, like I've lost my train of thought now too. I just, wanted to be able to give that back to people and want people to know that, like, yo, these things don't make us weak, they make us stronger. They help us. The more that we dig and find them and deal with them, the more that we learn about ourselves. And yeah, I want people to feel good.
I can second that. It's great as well when you how far we've come. You kind of look at even our parents' generation and how they spoke about
Right.
mental health, how they weren't able to access support in the same ways. And, in a relatively short period of time, it's really kind of come a long way. That's all we have time for today. We have some amazing questions from the audience. We've got time to quickly run through 3 of them. The first one is to Tati. And the question is, I can't help but compare myself to celebrities and influencers that I see on Instagram. What can I do to break the cycle?
Well, first I'll start by saying, just so that we're not that cool. None of them are that cool. Like, understand that celebrities are just people too, and like, it's part of their job to present a facade, not the real version of them. So don't be intimidated by that. You're probably so much cooler than those people that you see. And yeah, just realize that they've done a lot of augmenting, and it's like the more you do that, the more you, I feel, can become sort of dead inside at times, because you're taking away from yourself to present a, you know, thing that's not real. So yeah, it's not real. Don't believe it. Don't trust it.
Social media is literally a showreel, isn't it? Next question is to Alexis. What tools and skills did you learn creating online content that you use while acting, writing, or directing?
Right. I think the main thing that I learned from like making so many videos is my voice and point of view. And I think in terms of whether it's storytelling or like we've been talking about self-expression, how you dress, how you style your hair, I think all of those things sort of connect to learning who you are. And I think we've all touched on this in moments, and Matthew specifically, in terms of, you know, self-expression and kind of, I think the main thing that I learned by making so much content was what Matthew was saying, is sort of like you try stuff, you know, and you feel it out, and maybe you wear your hair one way a certain day and you're like, really not feeling that, or you make a certain video and you're like, ooh, that wasn't it. But that's how you kind of end up getting closer and closer to who you are, and you know, in my case, and potentially, you know, other storytellers, the stories that you want to tell.
And that is a perfect segue into our final question, which is for Stephen. And it's, what advice do you have for somebody who is experimenting with their self-expression but is feeling self-conscious? How can they overcome that?
I can give it from this perspective. I live in New York, and something that helped me was to know that I wasn't the strangest thing anyone was going to see that day. So that really helped set a tone for the bizarre things that happen. So I can probably guarantee you that whatever story you've created in your head, where you feel like people are going to be staring at you, or if you feel self-conscious, that let them stare at you. Like, you'll give them a great story to tell, but also, like, you're not going to be the strangest thing that someone sees that day.
Well, I don't know about you lot, but I feel so uplifted by this conversation and so empowered. And I hope everybody at home is feeling the same. This concludes our panel discussion. I just want to say a massive thank you to our incredible panelists, and also a massive thank you to göt2b for putting together this incredible summit, and to you at home, the audience, because without you, none of this would be possible. We'd really love to invite you to join a personalized 20-minute breakout session. There should be instructions on your screen on how to do that. You will be able to join a session with either Avani, Ditch the Label, Blur, Stephen and Matt, Tati and Alexis, based on the topic that interests you the most. And as I mentioned earlier, if any of the issues that we've discussed today affect you, please head over to ditchthelabel.org for advice and support. Thank you, everybody.
I know there's not a chat function for the room, so if you want to react to anything, be sure to like use the emoji function and like send us some emojis so we feel some energy, get that same like live feel. Hi. All right, we're just going to get started here. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. This is Nourishing Mind, Body, and Soul. It's self-care as the root of advocacy. And I'm Stephen, and this is Matt Diaz. It's so interesting. It's like weird to kind of like just be up here on the screen, just saying hello to everybody from my house. But I am Stephen Sharp Jr. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a social media content creator. I am also a mental health advocate, and I am the founder of Nobius Creative Studios, which is an agency based out in New York City. And over to Matt.
Yeah. I'm Matt Joseph Diaz. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am a social media content creator as well, primarily in self-love and body image. I'm also a freelance writer and public speaker, and you can find me at Matt Joseph Diaz. So just a quick run through of sort of what we're going to get up to today. I know that we have a very limited amount of time, so we want to be very, efficient, but we also want to leave room for, the back and forth and hopefully some questions at the end. So first and foremost, Stephen is going to lead us through a grounding exercise that is going to help us refocus our attention and sort of just enter the correct space to have this conversation, which I'm very much looking forward to because I need to be better at doing that myself.
I think your audio cut out, Matt.
Oh, okay. Got you. Cool. Hi. Yeah, I'm having some like audio troubles where I think like our internal channel and then the audience channel is sort of causing some feedback. So if I could just stay on mute, it should be fine. So we're going to get to a grounding exercise. And then secondly, I'm going to go through and talk about mindful vulnerability, where we'll talk about self-care being the root of advocacy and what that looks like. And then third, we're going to talk about self-care practices to protect your own mental health and nourish the mind, body, and soul. So Stephen, take it away whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so this grounding exercise I felt is really helpful, especially, after coming off the panel and just our life in general. It's good to be able to get into our bodies. There's such a disconnect, I feel, in our culture where the mind and the body are disconnected. So this is a good way, at least for me, to help just like get grounded into my body. So I invite you all to close your eyes. If you were operating a vehicle, I would advise against this. But if you're in
gymnast, I graduated high school, I wrote a book, I had a makeup collection come out, many amazing things happening. But yeah, I've just been on social media for a really long time, and I'm really excited to talk to everyone.
That's awesome. And yeah, talk, kind of, you mentioned your book here. So could you tell us a little bit about backstory? How did the idea for the book come about?
Yeah, so the idea was I kind of wanted to tell more about my life and like what I've been through and how I got to where I am today, because a lot of people like to just jump to conclusion that like, oh, this is what happened. So I wanted everyone to know how I got here. And so I thought the easiest way would be a book because it's easier to write things out than kind of try and individually tell everyone by myself.
Yeah, I bet that would be a lot of people to tell as well. You've got a huge following on all your platforms, so yeah, it'd be a lot of talking for you. I'll just start with, how did you come up with the name? Because writing a book is hard enough, but just the title itself, it's great.
Yeah, thank you. When I do my makeup looks for like Halloween and like just random looks all the time, they always have a backstory to them. And that's what I've always been saying ever since I started doing makeup. And I think I was just like, well, my life has a backstory to it that people don't know, so that would be like a perfect name. So backstory, my life so far.
Yeah, perfect. That's awesome. So what made you what made you want to write a book? And I guess why now? Because
Yeah, once again, like it's just been, I wanted everyone to know like how I came about and like how I got here. But it's also, I wanted to talk about my life and my struggles, because usually talking about that kind of stuff helps other people, and all I want to do is help. So I put in a lot of good advice and stuff that I went through as well, so that others don't feel alone.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I think I've never written a book myself. I imagine it's incredibly hard, but, was there a certain part that you found harder than others?
I think about probably the gymnastics part was one of the hardest, just because I really do miss gymnastics a lot. That took up a lot of my life, and gymnastics has kind of shaped me to who I am today. So just talking about it and like rejoining that like mindset of being a gymnast was a little bit hard. And I would also say just trying to give you guys as much information, but also keeping, some things personal to me and not have the entire world know about everything. I think that was also kind of hard, but I'm pretty sure I wrote almost everything about me in the book anyways, because I just can't keep anything to myself.
I mean, I can't wait to read it. And kind of, even if like you've gone through so much, and I kind of wonder how, if you've experienced bullying, and if you have, kind of, how do you feel like it's shaped the person?
The solidification of myself became stronger. Yeah. How about yourself, Alexis? What got you into acting and storytelling?
In general, I think something I've been thinking about a lot lately is I think like the core of it is I grew up in a pretty like chaotic home environment, and I think I started sort of telling stories, and like, when I was really little, I wanted to be an author, and always had an interest in acting and just storytelling in general. And I think it was a way for me to sort of like help understand the world, because there was, a lot going on and a lot that was like confusing for me being so young, that in telling stories and sort of creating my own worlds and creating my own narratives, I was able to like understand what's going on and get a better sense, not only of the world around me, but of myself. And now, even like on my own time, how I sort of process things and deal with things is through journaling and writing. And like, if I'm ever really confused by a situation, I'll write about it. And that always like helps bring things to the forefront. And also sometimes I'll, even when I have like difficult conversations to have, or like uncomfortable conversations, I'll like write down what I want to say, and that much better helps me express myself clearer to other people. So it's been just like the main way I've been able to kind of like communicate and interact with the world. And would you say like so you said, Tati, that you would step into, different characters. Are there like certain qualities that you've noticed that you've taken from characters you've played that have kind of, maybe unlocked parts of yourself, or made you like realize new things about yourself?
Definitely. The most prominent example that I have, or that has always stuck out to me, is when I did The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Being Prudence, I am so different than Prudence in so many ways. She's this like, she starts out as a villainous sort of character or antagonistic sort of character and redeems herself over time, but she's very cold, very calculated, and let's just say the HBIC. And she's also very unapologetic in her nature. She was an orphan, and so she just sort of stands strong in herself. And through playing Prudence, I definitely gained a lot of self-confidence and sort of learned for myself how to be unapologetic in who I was. And I feel like through just having to bring that out, and of course bring it out in a truthful way as we need to as actors, I sort of forced myself into a just more confident stance, like, because out of necessity, as well as like through playing, I think, a lot of characters, I'm able to also learn, and you can be a multifaceted human, that you don't have to
people, my career fields, and my interests. And here's the thing about flowers and this whole metaphor, is that these petals can shed and grow and change as we go through life. We can completely change ourselves and transform ourselves. It doesn't matter. And we are allowed to have as many or as few petals as we want. You can be a tulip, boom, tulip emoji. You can be a bouquet, boom. You can be any type of flower you want to be. And with this understanding, we can also be reassured that very few people go through the garden of life looking at folks going, looking at flowers rather, and saying that flower has too many petals. That flower doesn't have enough petals. If they are, that's completely on them. And so when it comes to being told you're too extra or too much, completely disregard it, because the fact is that our self-understanding shouldn't be viewed as, this is how I was looking at identity previously. I was thinking of my identity as books on a shelf. Here's the book about Blackness. Here's the book about being queer. Here's the book about being a woman. Here's the book about being American. Here's the book about speaking Spanish. And I was just thinking, like, wow, the shelf is getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and there's only so much space. But you can think of or Google or see so many flowers that have just infinite petals, infinite arrangements, and they all belong to that garden of life. And looking at ourselves in this way opens up that weight and that heaviness that comes from being a stack of books or a stack of identities and understandings, to knowing that even if you see two roses, those two roses formed differently, formed independently. Yeah, they're both roses, but they're on their own unique thing. And so that's the first aspect of it. If you all want to throw some flower emojis to see, I know that we're like limited in what we have for flower emojis, but I love doing this exercise. Just anecdotally, some of the folks that I've done this exercise with previously, one young girl told me that she was a lotus flower because that's the flower that, represents her community. And I thought that was so beautiful. And then there was another girl, and you could tell she was like kind of tough. This was at a secondary school I did a talk at here in London last time I was here. And she was talking about how she's a rose. And she said, well, yeah, because sometimes people just want to have me around to look at me. And you could tell she was in that period of her life where she's starting to feel a little bit insecure about puberty and all those things. And she said, yeah, but there's so many layers to me. And while you might see the outside, you don't know my full story. And I was like, ooh, it was just so beautiful to see, because so often we are expected by society, by these different systems, to live one aspect of our life, our entire lives. We're supposed to go to school, get in student debt, go to college, get a job, stay in that job forever, even if it's miserable, and not branch out or try to be experimental. We're not allowed to express ourselves. But the fact is that we absolutely should be, and that we absolutely are. And it takes some, difficulty. It takes some wrangling. It takes some strategizing to get used to all the ways that we express ourselves and convey that self-expression to other people. And that takes me to my next section. So if there's any questions, I think you can throw them in the chat. And you can ask me questions. I would just put like question for Blair, and then there's a white box that will open to a Google form, and you can send your questions there too. That's what Jessica says. So as you throw in your questions about the first identity exercise, let's get into our conversation about how can still be scary, but it's often incredibly powerful. There is always someone there to make sure that the conversation doesn't become aggressive in any way. And this is a proactive and effective way to combat cyberbullying. And in my experience, while students might feel apprehensive at first, when they actually do it, it is really productive, and it can help get to the real root of the problem and make the perpetrator of the bullying regress their own behaviour. So this leads me on to my final tip. Always remember that and secure people do not bully other people. People who are bullying are going through a difficult time themselves and will often need a lot of help and support. That doesn't make it right what they're doing, but it does help you to gain some perspective and understanding, and help to reassure it's never your fault. Try your best not to let yourself internalize this cyberbullying and see their nasty behavior as a reflection of who you are. So now I believe we should have 5 minutes for a quick Q&A. So hopefully you might have already submitted via the form, but if you haven't, you still might have a chance now to click the ask your question box just below my face and ask any important questions you have, and I'll try my best to answer, give you support. So my first question is, if you could give just one tip, what would it be? And my tip would be, I think all of these are really important, but my tip would be to keep a record of everything. So that was the screenshot tip, because I think we might not know in the moment how far the cyberbullying is going to go. And as I say, it can be easy to delete information online that people have said, but having that evidence there can really help you to get the support and to make sure that the bullying is stopped and doesn't continue to go further. So thank you very much for that question. I think that's a good one. There are a lot of tips in there, but I think that's a really important one to screenshot and keep track of everything. So my next question is, how did you get involved with Ditch the Label, and what do you like most? So I got involved with Ditch the Label quite simply through, searching for a job online, like most people do these days. And I was in teaching at the time, and I was thinking about exploring other avenues. And I really knew that when I started teaching, as much as I love being in the classroom with people, I really wanted to try to make a larger difference and help to change the education system here in the UK, because I know that teachers try their best, but there are lots of things that perhaps can be improved, and mental health in particular has always been something very close to my heart, and I think it still needs a lot of development in schools. So Ditch the Label allows me to make an impact on young people's lives, to educate about mental health and try to sort of reform the way that
same breath of energy, and that's not true. It's people will likely not be able to give you back the same energy that you've given to them.
Truly.
So learning how to say no was a huge thing. And that's one of my bigger boundaries, is finding ways to say no to things that I truly don't want to do. And it started with like events. I get invited to a lot of events, and I don't need to be in every room, frankly. I don't need to be in every room. I don't need to be meeting everybody. And there's just certain things that interested in, and showing up and giving my energy to something that wasn't beneficial or that I wasn't able to contribute to. I felt it's like I need to just say no to these different things instead of expending all this energy, which is a whole other topic of just our energy being one of our most valued resources. I think just know and finding ways to separate your work from your personal life.
No, totally. I 100% understand that. And it's so difficult. And I think you saying that, as soon as you started explaining it, I was like, oh man, I think I just discovered something new I have to work on. Damn.
Speak upon things, because people are going to be like, wait, what happened? You just got to be real with everyone. And I feel like that's creates a bunch of friendships with people that support you and follow you in everything that you do. Because from the very beginning, I've always tried to show everything about me, not all the personal stuff, but options that I'm going through and what's happening and how I dealt with it. And I feel like that really helps. And then just, talking about mental health and talking about things that are important for people to be able to read that and just know that they're not alone is probably one of the best feelings that you could ever feel.
Yeah, yeah, too true, too true. And then I've got another one here. It says, so did you quit social media because of its negativity?
Yes, there has been, sadly, there has been multiple times where I've almost just completely deleted all social media, got rid of my phone. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And it got to the point where after, like being off my phone for 3 days, I realized it wasn't worth the 3 or 4 comments that I just were just comments, because there's maybe 3,000 amazing, the most sweetest comments ever. And so I changed my mindset around. I'm like, people are going to hate on you. Really no reason, just because they're either bored or they're just jealous or they're just trying to be rude for no reason. There's some people with that mindset, and you can't really do anything to stop it, but change the way that your mindset works and how you think. I always say that everything happens for a reason, and that everyone just try to think positive if you want things to work out.
Somebody else doesn't feel like they're ready for that. Number 5, speak from your personal experience, not on behalf of others. So what this might look like is, I can't speak on behalf of what my sister's talking about without her permission, which she often gives me. But I want to make sure that I'm not being like, well, if I was Chelsea, which is my sister's name, this is what's happening. I want to make sure that I'm talking from my experiences, because that's my truth. But you also want to make sure to include credible sources when discussing information that's not personal. That's things like science, math. You just want to make sure that you're citing actual sources and not just going off thoughts and feelings when it's something like factually based. And number 6, be patient with yourself and others. Patience is a virtue all we really have in this world this time. People love to say life is short, but life is also very long. So be patient with others. And then the final reminder, remember that conversations do not have fun. If somebody doesn't accept you in the way that you understand your personal identity, their loss. But it's not your loss, because if we can get to a place where we are validating ourselves internally, even if it's something like, Pride Month, so many people ask me about coming out. Not everybody can come out. Not everybody can express themselves in the way they want to, but you can at least yourself in the way that you want to be received, that you can be who you want to be, even if that's only for yourself. That is valid. That is real. Even if it's only you and the 4 walls that you live in that know what really makes your heart sing, that is plenty. Because when we try to outsource our validation, that is so difficult to ensure. That is so difficult. It's just like trying to change somebody's mind. So we have our identities. We understand that we're flowers with many petals. And now we're armed with this resource that you've downloaded, all about how to have tough conversations. It's not perfect, but it's more tools than society often gives us. So, hey, I hope it's helpful. It's helped me a lot. And I hope you have a wonderful.
Back to the main stage now as the breakout room session has ended.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and being part of göt2b's first ever Self-Expression Summit. We hope you enjoyed escaping to our safe space and hearing from our incredible panelists, and of course learning more about Ditch the Label and the meaningful work they continue to do. Stay tuned for more news from göt2b in this partnership. göt2b will be sharing its ongoing effort, tips towards self-expression and anti-bullying methods on their website at www.göt2b.com/ditchthelabel. Please check it out and follow them on Instagram at göt2busa for more info. And we hope to see you all again very soon on the self-expression journey. Bye!
You are not alone. More than half of people under 25 have experienced bullying at some point, and research has shown that 3 out of 5 people have experienced cyberbullying at some point. 2/3 of tween victims of cyberbullying said that it had a negative impact on how they felt about themselves. göt2b's brand purpose is to encourage self-expression and celebrate who you are and who you want to be. Now is the time for göt2b to take a stand, and together with Ditch the Label, we will be standing up for something. You. Ditch the Label is a global youth charity dedicated to providing equality and support to those negatively affected by bullying and prejudice. Together, Ditch the Label and göt2b are uniting to take an active stand against all forms of bullying and cyberbullying by bringing awareness and being a strong voice of advocacy. Follow along on Instagram at göt2busa to get on the self-expression journey with göt2b and be who you want to be at göt2b.com.
Jessica?